How can Utah football convince Jerome Myles to come back to Utah after committing to Ole Miss and Lane Kiffen? That's what we'll be discussing on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X today. My name is JT Wistricll, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. On today's show, I'm excited to talk about Jerome Myles, the five-star receiver, potentially flipping to the University of Utah after Utah had a strong visit with the potent receiver recently. Also, we'll be talking about Utah landing a commitment. It's on the offensive line, which I know is never the sexiest thing to talk about, but still very important to a program's success. And I want to close with a positive NFL update for Sione Vaki, which is something exciting as the former Ute and the Lions' fifth-round pick will be looking to make a big impact on a team that made it to the NFC Championship last football season. But as I said, let's start with Myles, right? Because this is big for Utah. An opportunity to land a five-star receiver. If you would have told me Utah would have a chance at a five-star receiver, gosh, even especially after the passing offense we saw this past fall, I would have said, yeah, it's probably not going to happen. But Myles got bumped up to a five-star, and that's what makes me go, okay, Utah has a shot at Jerome Myles. Because the truth is, I always thought Utah had a shot at Jerome Myles once he kind of burst onto the scene. And not just because of the recruiting interest and all the things like that, but look, when you land a guy's high school quarterback, that's whenever this really picked up steam to me. When Isaac Wilson committed to Utah, Myles went to Corner Canyon, not just to play for their head coach, Eric Kerr, who has a great track record of producing and helping the elite high school players continue to hone in and improve their skills and help them reach a high collegiate level and even get to the NFL, but the opportunity to also play with his high school teammate last year, Isaac Wilson. That's part of the reason Myles went to Corner Canyon, and he's got the opportunity to come and do it at Utah. And of course, just also staying in the state, right? Family and everything close by, all the things of that nature. It makes sense why Utah is still in it for Myles. But then he went to Ole Miss, and you're like, dang, hard to say no to Lane Kiffen if you're trying to be a receiver and in a more pass-heavy offense, or not, shouldn't say more pass-heavy offense because they like to run the ball a lot too, but an offense that is more known for airing it out than Utah, who is known for running the ball and defense. And Lane Kiffen is known for his offensive creativity, which includes both running the ball and throwing the ball at a pretty high level as they did last year in the SEC, with former Corner Canyon quarterback Jackson Dart, who's currently trying to lead them to a big season this fall. So Myles commits to Ole Miss, but still takes his visit with Utah. He's actually still going to take a visit to A&M and Michigan, as Blair Ungolo, who does a great job for 24/7 Sports, has been reporting on everything that Myles has been up to and reported a lot on the visit. He even said about Myles' visit to Utah, because he committed to Ole Miss, but still took the visit. So there's a lot of interest there, obviously. He said that Utah is still very much in it, and they impressed Jerome Myles a lot. And we don't even need to take Blair's reporting to understand that, because as we talked about on the show earlier this week, Jerome himself straight up came out and said, what did you think? They asked him, what do you think of Utah? Like, and he said, they answered the only question I have. So then everyone said, okay, what was the question? And he said, is Utah going to throw the ball more? Pretty blunt question, an understandable one if you're a five-star receiver who's hoping to be involved and utilized as well as win at the next level. And he was even asked more specifically, like, okay, was asked, what's the question? What was the answer? And the answer he got was, the best players are going to get the ball, and we do what it takes to win, which if you look at Utah, that is very much the case. Dalton Kincaid, Brant Keithy, Devon Vele late in the season. That Utah has a history of still finding the ways to get their best players the ball. Hasn't been wide receivers as much lately, and even though Vele had a really good season, right? It wasn't like he was lighting the world on fire for collegiate receivers. Yes, he got over 600 yards, I believe, is what he ended up at. But obviously, the top guys, he was nowhere near them. And Myles is among the top recruits in the country, understandably. So he wants to be among the top players when it comes to the collegiate, the next level, having an opportunity to get the ball. He's the 31st ranked player nationally. He's the 5th ranked wide receiver and currently the top player in the state of Utah, according to the 24/7 Sports Player Rating. So as I teased off the top, how can Utah convince Jerome Myles to stay in Salt Lake City? Well, it sounds like they did a lot of work on the recruiting visit, as we mentioned, talking about, hey, we prioritize, they can show him, hey, even though we didn't throw the ball a ton last year, which they can also attribute to the fact that Cam Rising was hurt and the backup quarterback situation was not consistent and always ideal for Utah. Obviously, even though they found ways to win games, we saw some games where Bryson was awesome and some games where Bryson was not. And that's just the matter of the fact. But there's reason to believe that this year and for years to come, when you look at how much more potent it feels like the arms of the backup quarterbacks are going to be going forward and the emphasis on the potent passing ability when recruiting quarterbacks, it feels like that in the future, if we see a Cam Rising or whoever the starter is get hurt, I don't expect the offense to go from 36 or 38 points per game, which is what they were at in 2022. And then 2023, that plummeted to 23 points per game. I just don't think that will be the case going forward with the amount of higher level recruits they've started to bring in, Isaac Wilson being chief amongst them. So they can say, hey, we have, when Cam is our guy and we're rolling, you can see what this passing offense can do. And we also involved our best playmakers. Utah has a history of doing so. The other thing Utah can do to convince Jerome Myles of this, because he won't be signing until December. So he'll probably stay committed to Ole Miss. I would be surprised if he flipped. You see guys flip in July and August all the time. So who knows exactly what he's going to do, right? But like Utah will still be in this until December, I think, until it's finally time to put the pen to paper. And what is Utah going to do? They're going to have Cam Rising, their guy, back. So they're going to get to show and see, hey, we told you we're going to be more explosive. Watch how much explosiveness to our offense is going to have when we have Dorian Singer, who should be one of the 10 to 15 best wide receivers in college football to me this coming season. If you look at the system of how Utah is hoping to maximize him and what he already did at Arizona a few years ago, I think Singer can get back to that level. Damian Alford, who averaged like 19 yards per catch, over 600 yards at Syracuse. He wouldn't have committed to Utah to play this year after having 2 strong years with Syracuse if he didn't feel like their offense was going to be more aggressive and involve the pass even more in the aerial attack. And a guy like Monty Parks who can take the top off of defense too, right? So is a Utah offense that has a chance to, hey, Andy Ludwig, Kyle Whittingham, Jerome Myles has said, I want to come to a place that's going to be involved. You're going to throw the ball more, do all those things. The coaches obviously told him yes, which is why Myles was fired up about his visit. He was posting and tweeting about it, and it's the reason he took the visit. He's given Utah a chance. Utah said all the right things. Now they have to do it this fall. They have to continue to win games and also win games if in just strictly in terms of landing Jerome Myles, win games and air the ball out prominently so that you can show your top, that 5-star receiver that, hey, we're serious about passing the ball more. And I do believe Utah is going to air it out a decent amount because while I think the run game is still going to be really good, just the weapons in the passing game. I mean, you can stop at Rising, Keithy, and Singer. I just think that's going to be a problem for Big 12 defenses. And I'm really excited to see those guys as well as Alford, Money Parks, Micah Pittman, Mekhi Bernard as a pass catching running back too. Landon King and his elite pass catching abilities to go along with Carson Ryan. Those are a lot of guys I think that are intriguing options that are really going to aid this Utah offense. This passing attack on paper hasn't had this many weapons in a while, it feels like. So if you're the coaching staff, they're going to try to let them shine this fall and utilize them and try to maximize their capabilities. And if Utah does that, they can show Jerome Myles, hey, you can stay right here in Salt Lake. You can be a focal point of this offense. You can play with your former high school quarterback. Once again, like he can come on right away. And just off the top of my head, right? Like I believe that he has a better chance to start right away at Utah than Eddie does at Ole Miss because they are known for getting just more elite receivers than Utah is. So Myles will walk in and instantly be, because I expect Dorian Singer to be one and done, instantly be the most talented wide receiver in that room. Tayshawn Lyon's also incredible. He's a 4-star, but we're talking about Jerome Myles, who is a 5-star in this instance. So he can walk in the room right away, be the most talented guy. Utah just got Devon Bailey to the NFL, right? So Tim Patrick's done good things in the NFL. There's lots of other elite recruits who have come to Utah, Jalen Johnson, even though it's a different position, and proved, hey, this is a place you can come to. You can get your skills developed to go off to the NFL. What can you also do at Utah? You can win. And if you're among the best, like a few years ago, we saw a high recruit in Lander Barton who came on and started right away. So, and even last year, right? Mikey Matthews was involved, even though he wanted to go to Cal after. All of those things factoring in, you can present Jerome Myles with all of those things that you've already proven to do, win, develop, and allow playing time early, as well as, if you're a receiver, be featured in the passing game. That's the last caveat that Utah just needs to reassure Jerome Myles with, and I think they'll want to pitch him on at the end of the season. You can be our Dorian Singer. Dorian Singer will have a chance to go over 800 yards. It's been a while since we've seen a Utah wide receiver do that, but I genuinely think he has that kind of capabilities, and very well could Singer could. And therefore, you're going to say to Myles, that could be you if you come to Salt Lake. So I do believe Utah will have a chance at Jerome Myles, but this is a story we're going to continue continue to recover. And I will give Jerome Myles a shout out. If you do see on his X platform, he did post today that he deadlifted 305 pounds because he still has another season to go at Corner Canyon. He's also going to be paired with Helaman Kasuga, who's another guy in the class of 2026 that Utah is after. So Utah was already able to land Wilson. Be interesting to see the year Kasuga has, and if Utah will have a chance to get him. But enough about the pursuit of a recruit. Let's talk about a guy that Utah has already landed as they added to the old block. I'm going to tell you about the newest Utah Ute commit in the class of 2025 in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you all today about one of the sponsors of our episode of Locked On Utes. It's our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Alrighty, moving on from Myles, let's talk about the newest Utah Utes commitment, and that is Soren Field, who is a 2025 6'6", 285-pound offensive lineman who also does some track and field in there too, if you check out his X bio. But Field did commit to the University of Utah, and this is a guy who, if you just turn on the tape, he definitely excites me. The first thing that stands out is the athleticism, which is a big thing, right? Because we're talking about a big guy. So in order to play at the next level, there's a lot of big guys, but how athletic are you? How well can you move? And at 6'6", 285, Field moves extremely well for his size. You can see right away the way he pulls. He's tenacious. He's a guy who can be a lead blocker. He can kick out defensive ends and widen holes. He's quick off the snap, very tenacious and aggressive. I like the leg drive, locks onto defenders, does a good job staying pretty low in pass protection, does a good job moving his feet, make sure to not let defensive ends get around him. This is a guy to me who could play all over the offensive line. You want him to be a guard, you want him to be a tackle, he can do whatever. And I think the versatility is key, right? Because Utah wants to put the best five out there. That's why a couple years ago, Satao Laumea, even though his best position was at guard, they moved him over to tackle because he's still a really good tackle, but they felt like their best five was with Satawa at right tackle, and then at right guard is where they put Michael Mokafisi. So I think that Sereno's versatility is absolutely key to his success, is going to be part of the reason that he can be very successful very quickly at the University of Utah. And of course, Utah wasn't the only school after Field. So you love that Utah was able to beat out other Big 12 schools, right? Like they were able to beat out Kansas. And this is a 3-star offensive lineman too. So a guy who other schools were looking at, and I know we just talked about a 5-star wide receiver, and we've talked about 4 stars a lot on this show too, but I've said this routinely. This Utah team that was winning, that won back-to-back Pac-12 championships, was built prominently with 3-star talent or less. So every guy that Utah adds and commits, we like to give some shine to on this show, because one of the guys that comes in as a walk-on can be the next Devon Vele, right? Can be the Brant Keithy or Devin Lloyd, who just shocks everyone who comes in, and just, it's a perfect match in terms of that player's skill set and their work ethic, as well as Utah's developmental system. That's why we want to talk about all these guys. And this is a guy right here in Soren Field that I think can come in and produce on this Utah offensive line. But we've talked about Field's ability a little bit, right? Has all the tools to be successful at Utah. And you can see why Jim Harding is a fan of his game if you turn on the tape. So let's not just talk about Field. Let's talk about the overall state of the Utah offensive line at this moment, and especially the future of this offensive line, because I think it's in a really good spot. If you talk about recent recruits they've landed, right, in the class of 2024, for example, they landed Isaiah Garcia, who was an elite 4-star offensive lineman, 24/7, I believe, at their final update actually had him as the top overall player in the state over Isaac Wilson. He's going to have a chance to produce right away. Do I expect him to produce right away? I think it may take a year because Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano are up front for this Utah offensive line. So I think he might have to wait a year. But speaking of Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano, those are young players right there. Lomu, I redshirted last year. Fano did start last year, but was just a true freshman and is still growing and had some really positive moments last year. So the core that this Utah offensive line is putting together, right? When you look at Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano, as well as Isaiah Garcia, that is 3 4-star offensive linemen. You love to see that if you're the University of Utah, and that's without even diving into some of the 3-star commits they've added, right? Whether you're looking back on a guy like Roger Alderman, who gets lost in the shuffle a little bit because of some of those guys with higher stars, right? He's in the program, he's working hard and doing everything he can to try to learn an opportunity, one that could come in the very near future. And Soren is also going to be coming in 2025, trying to work harder in that opportunity. And he'll be far from the only offensive lineman this team adds. But I love that Utah's recent recruiting uptick, if we go back to the class of 2024, where you landed, look, Utah hasn't landed a 4-star offensive lineman, but they've had back-to-back seasons in which they've landed a 4-star offensive lineman. The offensive lineman is paramount to a team's success. I said off the top of the show, it is never the position that draws the biggest cheers from the crowd or land on SportsCenter or anything of that nature. But the reason we see the best plays be made is because of offensive line more times than not, right? If you look at Cam Rising powering in the 2-point conversion against USC, why was every defender not all over him, even though he did it to break through a couple tackles, right? Because the offensive line did their job and generated movement. Pretty much every Dalton Kincaid's massive game against USC in that game, right? Cam had the time to go through and find Dalton because of the job the offensive line is doing up front. And they kept that USC pass rush, which I remember in 2023 coming into that game, I think they led the nation in sacks actually. So offensive line is key to setting everything up, making these stars the stars that they are. The quarterback, wide receiver, running back, they need the offensive line because on the other side of the field, of course, is a bunch of dudes trying to tackle them. So you need the offensive line to be able to handle those guys, block them out of the way, breaking it out of the simplest terms. I don't know why I'm doing that, but that's what we're rolling with right now, and remove them from the play. So it is just that reminder that the offensive lineman is incredibly important to a team's success. And I think so often that gets swept under the rug is the job the offensive line did. As I said last year, I thought the Utah offensive line from the years they won the Pac-12 championships, I would say of the last 3 years, last year's offensive line was the worst Utah had in those 3 years. They were still pretty good, but we've talked about this some more. I think it's the Joe Moore Award is given to the best offensive line annually. They released like the top 15 or 20 teams for it. Utah wasn't on it. There's been a lot of past years they have been in that mix, but whereas they had guys like Bama Laseni, Braden Daniels as well. And that's not even missing a couple of the other offensive linemen they've also had too, right? There were just positions last year where Utah didn't get like Michael Mokafisi still up and down. Spencer Fano was up and down, right? Coley at center, he did good, but still, had injuries in and out. Jaron Kump, especially early on in the season. Those guys overall still did a good job, but it wasn't as good of an offensive line production that we saw in the 21 and 22 season. So you're going to need that offensive line to get back up to, or at least pretty close. I don't think for Utah to win the Big 12, I don't think the offensive line this fall has to be as good as 21 and 22, but they have to be better than 2023. Utah has to be able to run the ball better consistently. And that will also be aided by lighter boxes because of Cam Rising and the passing ability, in my opinion, but also just getting better at handling their assignments, which all these guys I expect to do, right? Caleb Lomu, who has all the talent, had a year to sit back and watch. Usually takes a year for the offensive lineman to get up to the size and strength needed to play at this level. That's why Spencer Fano is already ahead of the curve, and he's going to settle back in at right tackle where he's more naturally comfortable. And I know it sounds simple just flipping left to right, but we've seen a lot of times. And I remember even from when I played offensive line just in high school, I was better on one side than I was the other. So those switches can genuinely help guys, especially when you're talking about just pass rushers coming from the left or the right. It's a different animal on level that you're dealing with when you're talking about a guys that elite and special on those each side, and their styles of rushing can be drastically different too. So I'm feeling good about the offensive line in 2024. If you look at the returners they have, as well as some of the newcomers that got loads of potential, also feeling like the Utah offensive line for the future of the O Block is in a good spot because of commitments this team is getting from players like Soren Shinofield, because I do think this is a guy who will have a chance to produce for Utah because of that nasty streak, the hand placement, everything I highlighted earlier. This is a really strong get for Jim Harding and the University of Utah. All right, before we get out of here on the final show of the week, I want to give a shout out to Sione Vaki, who the Scout or at Scout NFL X handle reported, and his report comes from Detroit Online, who is Jeremy Reisman, reported that Lions rookie Sione Vaki, this comes to us at X once again, has been one of the most impressive players at camp so far. Upon his arrival, Vaki reportedly watched all of Detroit's tape. Impressive. Knew 80% of the schemes, also very impressive, and drew them out against different coverages. You love to see it. It's a good start for the Utah product. Once again, that comes from Scout NFL. And Vaki, look, I mean, just an unbelievable season. Look at even what just scouted. Like if you click the replies of their thing on him, they call Sione Vaki the Shohei Ohtani of football. And obviously it's referring to his on the field skills. If you're looking back at what Vaki did at Utah, right, the versatility stood out. Safety, running back, wide receiver. 520 yards and 5 touchdowns on offense, and that wasn't even his main position. He had 92 tackles on defense, 2 sacks, an interception, and 12 tackles for loss, and was absolutely exceptional when you talk about just the cuts and the quickness. And I know he didn't run the fastest 40, but just flip on the highlights and watch the separation, those quick cuts that leave defenders in there and just shaking out of their boots, basically. Like that's what makes Sione Vaki special, as well as the work ethic. I remember watching him make plays in the 2022 Pac-12 championship game, thinking this is going to be one of Utah's best players come 2023 because of the signs he showed us. That's why we felt okay with RJ Hubert moving on. Is we're like, okay, feels like the safety room's in a good spot. It absolutely was, thanks to Sione Vaki, and he did a great job defensively and offensively. He's a guy who I think is going to play a lot for them on special teams early, and I still think eventually he's going to have a chance. The height will always be the one thing that will make it challenging for him at the next level. But when you are talking about his overall speed, his tenacity that he plays with, he's a strong tackler. He's got a great IQ and that work ethic. Once again, knowing the offense inside and out, and just all of the schemes. I'm sure he's playing on both sides of the ball. They're looking at where they want him and different things of that nature. This just feels like a guy with a lot of grit. And Dan Campbell absolutely loves him some grit, for those of you who watched Hard Knocks or have found other ways to see everything that Dan Campbell's about. So I love that Vaki's already hitting the ground running. It's going to be hard for him to contribute, I think, in 2024 because of David Montgomery. They still got back there too, as well as Jeremy Gibbs, who really burst on the scene throughout last season. They're rookies. So I don't know how much of him we'll see at running back this year, but I think he's going to make a difference early on special teams. I definitely think he's going to be a guy who dresses for them on Sundays, and I expect him to see him making plays not on special teams this year, and then not long after we'll see him making plays on offense and defense. But you love these positive camp reports that Vaki's off to a great start, and some we'll definitely have to talk about with some of these other pro Utes is that feels like a lot of these Utah guys are off to a strong start already throughout the NFL camps, or like guys like Dalton Kincaid that feel like they're just in for a massive year coming up in 2024. And we hope it's a massive weekend for the University of Utah. I'm sure they'll probably see some more commitments, at least if it's how it's been trending lately. It feels like we've been getting a commitment after commitment. So that is something hopefully we'll be diving into more next week. Either way, we'll definitely be talking more about Jerome Myles, Utah's recruitment of the other top players in and out of the state of Utah, as well as reacting to everything else happening on the University of Utah as they prepare for a run at the Big 12 title in 2024. That's going to do it for Locked On Utes this week. We thank you, as always, for making us your first watch and listen of the day, and we can't wait to be back with you with more Utah-related content next week.